Thanks for joining us. I'm Diane Rehm. Umberto Eco is often referred to as a polymath, a person of encyclopedic learning, a professor of semiotics, the study of signs and symbols, at the University of Bologna. His personal libraries contain more than 50,000 volumes in best-selling novels, including The Name of the Rose and Foucault's Pendulum. Philosophical, historical, and literary allusions abound, but his latest book draws on another aspect of his knowledge, the popular culture of his youth in Mussolini's Italy. It's an illustrated novel titled The Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana. Umberto Eco joins me to talk about the memories of his generation. We do invite your participation. Join us on 1-800-433-8850. Send us your email to drarshow@wamu.org. What a pleasure to see you again.
Nice.
Very nice to have you. You've written a novel about memory, and your protagonist cannot even remember his own name, but he can remember everything he's learned literarily. He can remember paintings, he can remember numbers, he can remember what happened when. Does this really happen in medicine, or is this a fictional kind of amnesia you've created?
That's no, that's absolutely true. I read a lot of clinical cases. It seems we have three kinds of memory. One is called the automatic one. You can lose your memory and to be still able to drive a car, to repeat certain automatic gesture. The biographical one, who I am, who was my mother, and they call it semantic. I would prefer to call it encyclopedical memory, by which you know that Tokyo is in Japan, that lions are animals, that Napoleon was an emperor, that to be and not to be was in Hamlet, and so on and so forth. So the examples exist, and I read all the interesting clinical cases. Only I tried to, especially in the first part, in which my character is trying to live without memory, by to imagine certain situations that are not yet in the clinical literature, but could become part of the clinical literature. For instance, the story of Sibylla. He comes back to his studio. He's a rare books dealer. He sees for the first time his beautiful young assistant. He feels a sort of emotion or thrill, and he wonders, maybe we had a love affair, but he cannot remember. And being a gentleman, he cannot ask. And she, since she knows that he has lost his memory, even though there was something, evidently she cannot speak about that, and so they continue to work together without, and he doesn't know. I think that could happen.
His wife, Paola, he's been married to for 35 years. He doesn't remember her.
Not even his daughters.
In the first few pages of this novel, The Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana, and I want to get to that title, he's in a fog, and he's coming through a fog. Would you read for us from the beginning of the book?
When you read, you will see that some sentences are in italic. They are quotations, because he coming out of his coma, because he had a stroke, he cannot think only in terms of fog, Fog is a beautiful metaphor for the loss of memory, and only in terms of quotations on fog, quotation of which myself I cannot retrieve the origins because I made the collage. So that they are now a potpourri. There is one that starts with Dickens, continues with Anderson, and ends with T.S. Eliot. But so I read only the first line. And what's your name? Wait, it's on the tip of my tongue. That is how it all began. I felt if I had awoke from a long sleep, and yet I was still suspended in a milky grey. Or else I was not awake, but dreaming. It was a strange dream, void of images, crowded with sounds, as if I couldn't see, but could hear voices that were telling me what I should have been seeing, and they were telling me that I couldn't see anything yet, only a haziness along the canals where the landscape dissolved. Bruges, I said to myself, I was in Bruges. Had I ever been to Bruges, the dead, where fog hovers between the towers, like incense dreaming, a grey city, sad as a tombstone, which chrysanthemums, where mist hangs over the facades like tapestries. My soul was whipping the streetcar windows so that it could drown in the moving fog of the headlamps. Fog, my uncontaminated sister, a thick, opaque fog, which enveloped the noises and called up shapeless phantoms. Finally, I came to a vast chasm and could see a colossal figure wrapped in a shroud, its face the immaculate whiteness of snow. My name is Arthur Gordon Pym.
And of course, that's not his name at all. Umberto Eco reading from The Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana. His name, according to his wife Paula, is Yambo, and he is, as you've said, an antique book dealer. His name and his nickname give readers a clue about what sort of person he is. Who is Giambattista Bodoni?
Giambattista Bodoni was a great typographer and publisher, inventor of the character so-called Bodoni at the beginning of the 19th century. And he, by chance or by a joke of the destiny, has a name that would have probably determined his vocation as a rare book dealer. Yambo, on the contrary, I chose this name instinctively, but it was the nickname of an author of children's books of my childhood, who wrote strange and modern art story, pretty gloomy situations with dark castles and wolves in the forest, and the little boy called the Ciuffettino, and so I put Yambo as the nickname of my character.
I love your descriptions of memory. Yambo says to his wife, "Where are we going now, Paula?" "Home, our home." "And then?" "Then we'll go inside and you'll get comfortable." "And then?" "Then you'll take a nice long shower, you'll shave, put on some decent clothes, and then we'll eat. And then, what would you like to do?" That's just what I don't know. I remember everything that's happened since my reawakening. I know all about Julius Caesar, but I can't imagine what comes next. Until this morning, I wasn't worried about any next, only about the before that I wasn't able to remember. But now that we're going somewhere, I see fog ahead of me, too, not just behind me. No, it isn't fog ahead. It's as if my legs were slack and I couldn't walk. It's like jumping. Jumping? Yes, to jump, you have to make a leap forward. But to do that, you have to get a running start. So you have to back up first. If you don't back up, you won't go forward. So I have the feeling that in order to say what I'll do next, I need to know a lot about what I did before. That's memory.
That's memory. And I was, if you want, telling in a sort of everyday language sometime that was told pretty well by St. Augustine, and even by contemporary philosophers like Husserl or Heidegger that spoke of the term is pretty difficult, but the three ecstasies of temporality, which is past, present, and the future. And we cannot conceive of future. We cannot have our past present to our mind.
Umberto Eco, his new book titled The Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana, with some of the most gorgeous illustrations I've seen in a long time. Stay with us. And welcome back. Umberto Eco is with me in the studio. His new novel, with various illustrations coming from various decades in his character's life, is titled The Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana. Will you tell me about that title?
The title was, in 1934, the Italian title of a story of an American comic book whose title of the entire series in America was Tim Tyler's Luck. The story of two boys in a special ivory patrol in Central Africa having a lot of adventures. And they were pretty popular in Italy at that time. But this title for that story, and so for a special comic book devoted only to that story, was invented by the Italian publisher. And I had it in mind like a magic spell. I found this fascinating to such an extent that when I told to some of my friends of my own age, you know, I am writing a new novel and the title will be that, they said, how marvelous, because probably at that time, the book in full color was very expensive, and we couldn't buy it, and we looked at it for days in the newsstands, fascinated by the title. So the story is irrelevant. The story is irrelevant. In fact, the story is a complete plagiarism from She of Ride Haggard, adventure story. But a bad form of plagiarism. But the title sounded magic, and my character keeps this title in his mind in some way. And when he gets in touch with some of the memorabilia of his childhood, that in some way produces in his mind the impression of déjà vu, not really a retrieval of the memory, but a feeling of déjà vu. He, without knowing why, calls this feeling as a mysterious flame, and it is only later when he finds the comic book that he understands what he had in mind, this story of the mysterious flame.
Why did you decide to set the novel in April 1991? This is on the eve of the first Gulf War.
Well, the story was the following. I needed to have a character of my same age in order to have lived the 30s and the 40s. But I wanted him a little younger than me, not 73 as I am, but at least 60, in order to have still the suspicion he had the story with the assistant.
He's 59.
And so I was obliged to go 10 years backward at that point. Well, the coincidence with the Gulf War sounded it was a way to say that my character was fundamentally a pacifist and things like that, because, as we discovered late, he had in some way removed the terrible memories of his childhood during the war, the partisan war, and so on and so forth. But if you want, I needed 10 years less, and so I chose that period.
Jambo, at the suggestion of his wife Paula, retreats to his childhood home to try to recreate his memories. And what does he find there?
Well, it was the country house of his grandfather, who, by the way, he was an old book dealer, not an antiquarian of the high quality of Jambo, but he was a collector of strange things. So his wife knows that in the attic of the house, there will be all the old collections of the grandfather, plus the real memorabilia of Jambo, his school books, and so on and so forth. And he starts exploring this attic, which is a sort of magic theater of memory in which he retrieves everything. And it comes from the fact that when I was 10 years old and we escaped on the countryside because of the bombing during the war, we were in a house where there was an attic, where I found really boxes full of all the school books belonging to the son of the owner, but they were not children school books, but university books. I remember that at the age of 11, I found there a copy of Discours de la Méthode by René Descartes, and I read the first page. So it was my first encounter with philosophy that maybe determined the rest of my life. And so he enters this attic in which he finds everything. His grandfather collected boxes. He collected newspapers. He collected postcards. And so
photographs.
Photographs. And so on. If you want, I read the page in which he retrieves the box of the effervescent powders for making mineral water.
Certainly.
Because Jambo has a lot of my personal memories, not all of them. And I gave him also the memories of somebody else, but some of them are the same. And next I came across a thin, late 19th century style of effervescente brioschi. A couple of cheerful gentlemen are tossing flutes of table water, proffered by a charming waitress. My hands remember first. You take an envelope containing a soft white powder. You pour it slowly into the neck of the bottle after that being filled with tap water, and you swirl it around a little to make sure no powder sticks to the neck. Then you take another envelope which contains a grainy powder made of tiny crystals, and you pour that too, and quickly, because the water begins to seethe immediately, and you have to hurry to get the cap on, and then wait for the chemical miracle to take place in that primordial soup as the liquid gurgles and tries to bubble out around the rubber gasket. Finally, the tempest subsides, and the sparkling water is ready to drink, table water, children's wine, homemade mineral water. I said to myself, Vichy waters. But besides my hands, something else had been set in motion, almost as it had been that day in front of Clarabelle's treasure. I looked for another container, this one not a tin, but a small cartoon, definitely from a later period, one which I had opened on countless occasions before we sat down to our meals. Its illustration would have been slightly different. This the same gentlemen who still were drinking the amazing water from champagne glasses, except that clearly visible on the table before them was a cartoon, identical to the actual cartoon, and on that second one were depicted the same gentlemen, drinking in front of a table on which appeared yet another carton of powder, that one also with gentlemen who, and so on forever. And you knew that all you needed was a magnifying glass or a high-powered microscope to see other cartons within cartons and a beam like Chinese boxes or Matryoshka dolls. Infinity, as seen through the eyes of a boy who has yet to study Zeno's paradox. The race toward an unreachable goal. Neither the tortoise nor Achilles would ever have reached the last cartoon, the last gentleman, the last waitress. We learn, as children, the metaphysics of the infinite and the infinitesimal calculus, though we are unaware of what we are learning, and it might be the image of an endless regress or its opposite, the dreadful promise of the eternal return and of the turning of the ages that bite their own tails, because upon reaching the final carton, were there such a thing, we might have discovered at the bottom of that vortex ourselves, holding the first carton in our hands.
Umberto Eco, he's reading from his brand new novel. It's titled The Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana. If you'd like to join us, call us on 1-800-433-8850. Send us your email to drshow@wamu.org. Yambo says at one point, whatever feelings I once had, feelings were no longer mine. I wondered whether I had ever been religious. It was clear, whatever the answer, that I had lost my soul. Tell me the link between memory and the soul.
It's not a link, it's absolute identity. Soul is memory. We have an identity because we have this extension of memory from the past to the future, as we said before. And in this sense, we have a soul. If we lose memory, we are brute animals. I insist in saying that even for a believer, it is true. Because if you go to hell having lost your memory, it's completely useful to have such a pain since you don't know why. And the same holds for paradise. So soul and memory are absolutely the same thing. And they are the same thing for individuals, but also for societies, for cultures. A society, a country, a culture preserves its own identity through memory, libraries, the continuity of a tradition. When all this, by some reason, is dismantled, that society loses its identity. There is no more community. There is no more. What was in the past the function of aged people? They were the keepers of memory, sitting under the tree. They told myths, stories. They transmitted experience to the grandchildren, And they were really the keepers of memory. If you killed them, there was no more tribe and community. Now, today, we have internet, and that's okay, and we can kill old people, but...
You grew up with the threat of Mussolini around you, and the war around not only your physical person, but your spiritual thinking. How much of that have you put into this book?
Everything, all. Because I try to tell the story, not so much of myself, but of my generation. And I had a pale idea of what I had to do before starting the novel, but I realized a lot of things in writing it. Because only at that moment I discovered, by checking the dates, saying, oh, this official fascist anthems is 1939. Okay, this comic book, is at 1939. This radio song is 1939. So I realized how much schizophrenic, happily, our education was. Because on one side, we received the official education, made up with rhetoric, nationalism, and so on and so forth. We were called to die for the glory of Mussolini. And so. But on the other side, we got the radio songs, silly songs about the everyday life, and I mentioned the American comic books that had an enormous ideological impact on us, because I remember to have discovered for the first time what the freedom of press was by reading Mickey Mouse Journalist.
At 25 before the hour, you're listening to the Diane Rehm Show. By reading Mickey Mouse. Extraordinary.
That's true. And this is the story of Mickey Mouse starting a newspaper, fighting against corrupted politicians, mobsters, being blackmailed, and so on and so forth. And we read it in a country in which all the newspapers said the same things because they received the orders from the top. And it was a great political discovery. Flash Gordon was a man fighting against a tyrant. So we discovered what a tyrant was, with the subtle suspicion, was Ming the same as Hitler or not?
What about the photographs?
But I put there a lot of memorabilia of every kind, from comic strips to official photographs of the regime, images of actresses that I remember to have seen in the magazines of my mother. And
but there is one photograph, especially.
It is a true one. It's the only one concerning
I want to ask you about.
Me.
And you write, and this, I'll read this. Only one of the photographs truly moved me. A snapshot, which had been enlarged, you could tell by the blurriness, showing a little boy leaning slightly forward, embarrassed, as a tiny girl tipped up on white shoes, put her arms around his neck and kissed him on the cheek. Mama or Papa must have caught us unawares, as Ada, tired of posing, spontaneously rewarded me with sisterly affection. Is that a photograph of you?
It's the real one.
It's just charming. And you came across that, and it became a part of this book, The Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana. When we come back, our conversation with Umberto Eco continues, and we'll open the phones for your questions, comments. Stay with us. Welcome back to our conversation with Umberto Eco, and we are talking about his brand new book. It's titled The Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana. It is an illustrated novel, a graphic novel with many photographs, with posters, various illustrations, many taken from comic books of the 40s. Here's our first email from Bill, who lives in Baltimore, Maryland, and listens on WJHU. He says, I've read all of Mr. Eco's novels and am currently reading Serendipities, his collection of papers on language and lunacy. In The Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana, I was struck by how many of Mr. Eco's usual themes, labyrinthine puzzles, paranoia, conspiracies, the hero as comic tragic figure, have become intensely personal. In fact, I would say he has distilled into his main character the essence of being a man in modern times.
I repeat, this novel is about the years of my childhood. So it looks so evidently also autobiographical, but once I was asked, with whom of your characters you identify yourself? And I said, with adverbs. And somebody has written an essay on this answer, because it's true that the real personality of an author sometimes is showed through style, not through the psychology of a character. In this way, I should say that each of my novels was autobiographical, even though I talked about Middle Ages or the Baroque era. It was always about something that was a part of my life. This one obviously looks more autobiographical, but don't be cheated. Maybe, in a way, one can say that the name of the rose is more autobiographical than that one.
Interesting. All right, let's open the phones now. 1-800-433-8850. We'll go first to Westlake, Ohio. Good morning, Helene. You're on the air.
Oh, good morning, Diane. What a pleasure to be talking to you today, and
Thank
especially to Mr. Eco. Mr. Eco, I've read several of your books, and one of them was about my hometown in Provence, about the Templars. And I was very fascinated by it, and to the very end, I believed everything you said. And I think the ending was, showed me that it was just perhaps your creation. And since I'm able to talk to you, I would like to ask if there's any truth at all in the about the
dans ma reconstruction de Provins, vous dites.
Pardon?
Ah non, je parlais français parce que
Oui.
I was speaking French since you were born in Provins.
Oui. And have you been there?
Yes, twice, because the second time I was invited, after having written the novel, I was invited by the mayor, since Provins had become a character of my novel, and then I visited part of the city I hadn't seen the first time, all the caves, the caverns, all the subterraneans, but I was there before, and I found in a bookshop a small booklet telling an old story about a treasure that inspired me in inventing my story about Provence. So I used some part of a true historical material, then I elaborated. But it is true that it was an important Templar center, and they were very powerful there, and so that's true. That's historical.
But we don't want to give away the ending of this story.
No. But it was a fascinating book, and it is so nice to talk about somebody who has been to Provence and to talk to you. You are a fascinating writer, and I will be sure to buy your last book next.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much for calling, Helene. Let's go now to Syracuse, New York, to Eric. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Diane. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Mr. Eco, first of all, I want to tell you that it's an honor to speak with you. I've read all of your books, and you are one of my most favorite authors.
Oh, thank you.
And second, some years ago, I read an article you wrote about translations of your books, and you were talking about the complexities of translating books, and I was wondering if you are satisfied with the translation of all your books into English, or for that matter, to any other language, or should we learn Italian and try to read all of your books in Italian?
No, I am satisfied of all the translators in languages I can read. So my French translator is marvelous. My Spanish translator is okay. My German translator is fantastic, and I am particularly happy with my English translations.
Jeffrey Brock.
Yes, but I want to pay homage to another person who is William Weaver, who has translated all my previous novels. He was the greatest translator from Italian into English. He has translated a lot of others, but 2 years or 3 years ago, he was sick and he cannot work any longer. Poor Bill. So we had to, the publisher and myself, we had to select a new translator, and there was certain three, as far as I remember, three tests. And we found Geoff Brooke, and he was marvelous. I'm very, very, very happy of what happened with him. We had a frequent exchange of messages in order to understand the various points. He showed a great sensitivity to the Italian milieu, to the Italian culture, and I was astonished also because William Weaver was living in Italy. He was an older person, more than 75. He spent all his life in Italy, but Geoff is a young person, 33. It seems he knows everything about the Italian culture and the history. So I was very, very happy, yes.
Eric, I'm glad you called. Umberto Eco, were you frightened during the Second World War for yourself and your family?
No. As a boy, you see the war around you. You see, as it happened to me in the last 2 years during the Partisan War, people on the street with the hole of a bullet on his forehead. But you are not afraid for yourself. It's like the Kim great game. You are part of a great game. It happened to me to listen shots passing upon my head and to jump in a bush in order to. But it was life. It's very strange. When I remember, I was never afraid because it was the death of other people. It is impossible for a boy to imagine that death can be also something concerning you.
But what
I discovered it only immediately after the war when I learned that one of my pals, my school boy, died under the bombing. And I was astonished to discover that a boy like me could die.
What about your parents?
Yes, but there is something in the novel, because we were escaping the countryside, and my father was still working in the city, and we heard that the town was bombed, because even at 20 miles of distance, we saw the flames, like in a thunderstorm, and we could know if he was okay only 3 days later, because telephones at that time were completely. So we had to wait at the end of the week, and he took his bicycle and went to visit us. And I had only a moment in which I saw, the only time in his life, my father crying, because he described a scene he saw in the city after the bombardment. There was a school destroyed, and he saw the corpse of young boy extracted from the school, and he was crying and telling that story. But you know, a war is a. Well, you have seen how much America has been struck by September 11, a tragedy like that. But for 5 years, for a young European boy, every day was September 11. Every day we saw something to fall down, burning out, and it is extraordinary to see how, being a boy, you live it as something natural, and you learn how to save your life. Well, I was in Prague when the Russians arrived with my wife and 2 friends 5 years younger than us. And we didn't know what could happen. Maybe it was the beginning of the Third World War. Maybe there was an insurgency in the city, and we started listening shots. They were nothing. But I saw my 2 friends go to the center of a square to see what happened. And I saw that myself and my wife, without previous agreement, put our bag on a corner in order to have 2 ways through which escape in case. That was something that we learned as children, and were able to know how to survive. The other 2, 5 years younger, didn't learn this technique of survival, and they were exposing themselves to shots. That's nice. I think that I learned how to survive this. I hope not to have the occasion to prove my ability, but that's okay.
At 7 minutes before the hour, you're listening to the Diane Rehm Show. And let's go now to Grand Rapids, Michigan. Good morning, Brian. You're on the air.
Good morning, Diane. Thank you for taking my call.
Certainly.
It's a pleasure to speak with Mr. Eco.
Hi.
I appreciate the opportunity. I just have a comment, and if he could comment on maybe the indifference that Italian people had when Mussolini took over, and some of the feeling of indifference the American people have with war in Iraq. And I'll take my answer off the air.
Thanks for calling.
But, somebody spoke for the Italian situation of a gray zone of people who were neither anti-fascist nor fascist. A dictatorship arrives when in a country there is a situation of trouble and of crisis. The same happened in Germany. And I remember that my mother was speaking telling about the days in which Mussolini took over. And she was working at the time for a senator, as a secretary for a senator, liberal senator. So I mean, liberal in the European sense, but in a sense, a democratic oriented. And he said, but maybe with the situation we are living, we need a strong man. So even a non-fascist senator was saying maybe we had to solve the situation in some way. Then Mussolini started slightly to reduce all the liberties. It took some years to and it happens that a country can become narcotized. In all cases of dictatorship, countries become narcotized. They don't understand really from the first moment what is really happening, and then step by step they get acquainted. You like to start with a joint, then some cocaine, then some morphine, and then you become a drug addict without realizing it. That is the way in which people sometimes accept dictatorships, and that happened in our country.
Do you believe that there is any comparison to what's happening in this country now?
No, I don't think there is a situation of dictatorship. I think, that's my opinion, that wrong decisions have been made, but there is still the possibility of criticism and of reaction, I hope.
Umberto Eco, his new novel is titled The Mysterious Flame of Queen Loana. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dan.
It was my pleasure. And thanks for listening. I'm Diane Rehm.